Hi, I'm Catlin. They used to call me the family failure, not in private, but into a microphone during a toast. A room full of people clapped while my sister smiled, like it was a joke. But the man she planned to marry? He turned to me and said, "Thank you," because I was the one who paid for the venue, the one who built the company he worked for, the one she never mentioned. She left my name off the program, off the slideshow, off the list. But why did she erase me? While living in my home, using my money, wearing my clothes? Was I really the failure? Or just the part of her story she couldn't control? And if I never said a word, how did the truth get so loud? They didn't look up when I walked in. Not one face turned toward me, not even a flicker of recognition. I stood for a moment just inside the gate, hands loosely folded in front of me, watching laughter bounce off plastic chairs and paper plates, stacked with deviled eggs and store-bought pie. The Carmody family reunion brunch, third Sunday of May, rain or shine. And I was invisible. Delilah was perched on a patio stool, legs crossed, drink in hand, talking to a woman in a cobalt dress with a southern drawl thick as molasses. I heard her giggle, effortless, polished. Then the woman asked, "So, did your sister make it?" Delilah didn't miss a beat. "Oh, it's just me today," she said, her voice light, keeping it simple. I looked down at the lemon bars I'd baked the night before, no box mix, and walked them to the folding table near the edge of the yard. I slid them between a tray of Costco pinwheels and some sad-looking celery sticks. No one noticed. Not even Aunt Sharon, who once told me lemon reminded her of her first kiss behind the church after choir practice. I poured myself a weak iced tea, skipped the sugar, and found an empty lawn chair in the shade. The sun was relentless on the others, but no one joined me. I didn't expect them to. The conversations kept circling around Delilah. Her wedding plans, her designer, her bachelorette trip to Aspen. She floated through the backyard like a well-rehearsed hostess, never needing to stop and listen because the story was always about her. That was her gift, shaping a moment around herself so tightly there wasn't space left for anyone else. Across the lawn, a man in khakis and boat shoes approached her. "I heard you have a sister. She's in consulting?" he asked. Delilah tilted her head like she was pondering a grocery list. I had a sister who did odd jobs, data something, freelance, I think, nothing serious." Someone at the table laughed and muttered, "Every family has a wild card." They laughed harder at that one. No one looked my way. I lifted my glass, took a small sip, and let the ice clink quietly. I wasn't angry. Not really. That would have implied I expected different. What I felt was older than anger, closer to that dull ache you get when you've been sitting wrong too long and your body forgets comfort was ever an option. I remembered the time I paid off our cousin Joe's mortgage after he lost his job. Quietly, no paper trail. They held a backyard BBQ in his honor a month later. Delilah gave a speech. She thanked everyone who pitched in. My name never came up. I remembered when Delilah moved into my condo for a month or two after her PR firm folded. That was 11 months ago. She still had my spare key, still used my guest towels. But in this yard, in this story, I didn't exist. From my seat beneath the tree, I watched Everett, her fiancé, flip burgers beside Uncle Rich. He seemed decent, kind eyes, clean laugh. He didn't know, not yet. 3 months ago, Delilah had asked for help covering the deposit on her venue. "Just until my refund from the planner comes in," she'd said, breezy and confident. I transferred the funds that afternoon, quietly, no questions, no conditions. I signed the check with my business name, R. Cruz Consulting. She didn't ask what the R stood for. She never has. Back in the present, I noticed the ring on her finger catching the sunlight as she adjusted her hair. Everett leaned over and whispered something into her ear. She beamed like she invented joy. I took a slow breath. That man raising a toast with her smile doesn't know I built the stage they're standing on. Everett raised his glass, smiling like he had everything figured out. I let mine sit untouched, the condensation dripping slowly along the sides, as if even the glass knew not to try too hard to be seen. Later that night, I slipped off my shoes at the door and stepped into my condo. The quiet was a relief. The kind you only get after you've held your breath through a whole afternoon without even noticing. I padded into the kitchen, dropped my keys in the bowl near the sink, and spotted two strangers at the island bar, laughing with Delilah like old friends. "Catelyn, you're back!" she sang out, still in her silk robe, hair in loose waves like she'd just walked off a set. "We were just finishing the last of that cab you brought back from Napa. Hope that's okay." It wasn't a question. One of the men turned. "Oh, you must be her roommate," he said, eyes still on Delilah. "You guys have a great place." She smiled. "We make it work. She's between contracts right now, trying to find her next step." That word, between, hung in the air like a flicked knife. Deliberate, surgical, unnecessary. I didn't correct her. I just walked past the empty bottle, grabbed a can of sparkling water, and retreated to my room. I closed the door quietly behind me and sat on the edge of the bed, gripping the cold aluminum like it might keep me from saying what I wouldn't take back. It was always like this. Public play, private silence. She knew the truth, that I owned the apartment, that I ran a firm with international clients, that the wine she poured had been charged to my business card without asking, but the game was always better when you could convince others they were watching a rising star and her shadow, not the other way around. An hour or so later, I headed back out to grab something from the laundry and crossed paths with Ms. Hensley, the older woman who cleaned the floor twice a week. Her back was slightly bent, but she always stood tall when she spoke. "Your sister's got such good taste," she said warmly, nodding toward the front door. "She's lucky to live in a place like this." I opened my mouth, then closed it. It wasn't worth it. I just smiled. "She is," I said. I walked past her, rounded the corner, and leaned against the hallway wall for a moment. That line, "she's lucky," stuck with me. Not because Ms. Hensley was wrong, but because she was right. Delilah was lucky. She had a good address, matching furniture, and a sister who kept her mouth shut. That was worth more than square footage. After the guests left and the lights dimmed, I sat at the kitchen counter with my laptop open. Lease agreement, property taxes, utility accounts. Everything was in my name. She'd never even chipped in for toilet paper, much less rent. I clicked over to my banking app, saw another charge from Instacart. 2 bottles of imported wine, $76. Charged to the shared card. My card, no text, no note. She had been supposed to stay for a month, to regroup after losing her job. It had been 11 months. I leaned back, staring at the screen, and thought about all the things I didn't say. The moments I let slide. The times I bit my tongue so hard it bruised my own sense of self. The next morning, I woke up early. No reason, just couldn't sleep. I brewed coffee, poured 1 cup, and left a note on the fridge. Plain white paper, neat handwriting. "Monthly contributions are due by the 5th. Let me know if you need the Zelle info." That was it. No smiley face, no signature. Just a small, quiet line in the sand. She came into the kitchen around 10, yawning, stretching like a cat who owned the place. She read the note, blinked once, then turned to me and grinned. "Well," she said, voice sugar slick, "somebody woke up with a business hat on." I didn't respond. She smirked, pulled open the fridge, and grabbed a peach. "You know, Kat, not everything's about invoices and line items." I watched her leave the room, still chewing, like nothing had shifted. But it had. After she walked away from the fridge with that smug little grin, I sat back down at my desk and opened my laptop. Not to work, but to breathe. The kind of breathing that slows you down before you say something that burns bridges with gasoline. I didn't need that. I just needed space. 3 days passed without much exchange between us, which was a mercy. Then, out of nowhere, Everett popped into my office between meetings. "You know, we're doing the final walkthrough Friday," he said, half spinning the chair beside me. "You should come by the venue, see how it all turned out. You helped pull this off. I looked at him over my glasses. I don't think I'm on the guest list, he chuckled. Stop. You're practically the reason it's happening. I didn't push it. There was no point. I knew Delilah hadn't mentioned me. She never did. Not in public, not when it counted. I just nodded and murmured, I'll think about it. That Friday, I showed up. Quietly. No RSVP. No one stopped me at the door. The rooftop was stunning. Strings of soft lights crisscrossing overhead. A spread of catered dishes laid out like an art exhibit, and jazz humming from hidden speakers. I wore a simple black dress, clean lines, nothing flashy. I walked in, poured myself a glass of champagne, and stood by the railing as the sun dipped behind the skyline. People were talking, old classmates, family friends, clients Delilah once advised. But I had cleaned up after. A few recognized me from business articles, offered polite smiles. Most didn't know me at all. That was fine. Delilah saw me about 20 minutes in. Her eyes widened like she'd seen a ghost. She mouthed something I didn't bother decoding, some version of, "Why are you here?" I raised my glass slightly and turned away. She didn't approach. An hour later, she clinked her glass. A hush fell. She stepped onto the small platform near the garden wall, wearing a deep burgundy gown and that spotlight-ready smile. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "This day means everything to Everett and me, and I just want to take a moment to recognize those who've helped us become who we are." She listed names, family members, former mentors, her favorite yoga instructor. Then, her tone changed. "And to those who didn't always understand the path I was on, thank you too. You reminded me what I didn't want to become. Failure teaches, if we're smart enough to learn. Some of us learn quicker than others." The laughter was soft, polite. No one looked at me, but I felt the air shift. She glanced in my direction. Barely. Like I was just part of the furniture. I stood there, still. I didn't blink. I didn't shift my weight or look away. I just sipped my drink, slow and steady, and waited for her to finish. When the music returned, people clapped and resumed chatting like nothing had happened. Everett made his way toward me, weaving through the crowd. He handed me a fresh drink and said gently, "That part about failure, she wasn't talking about you, right?" I let a beat pass. "I didn't realize I was famous enough to be a metaphor," I said, letting the corner of my mouth curl, just slightly. He looked down at his glass. "She shouldn't have said that." "She said exactly what she meant to say," I replied. I turned and looked out over the skyline. My name was never going to be mentioned, not in her speeches, not on her invitations, not on the plaque outside that venue. But I was there. I had built pieces of this night that she couldn't erase, even if she tried. There are moments where silence keeps you safe, keeps things from exploding, keeps you from becoming the villain in someone else's story. But that kind of safety starts to feel like surrender, and I wasn't sure I wanted to be quiet anymore. The wind had picked up that evening after the toast. I stood for a long moment by the railing, glass still in hand, as people moved on with drinks and small talk like nothing had just been said. By the time I got back to my car, the air felt heavier than before. Charlotte's kind of humid, like the atmosphere itself was holding its breath. 2 hours before that, I had walked into the venue's lobby and politely gave my name to the young woman at the check-in table. She scrolled through her tablet, then looked back up. "I'm sorry," she said, forcing a professional smile. "I don't see you on the list. Are you with one of the vendors?" "No," I answered calmly, pulling a folded piece of paper from my clutch. "I'm not on the guest list, but I paid the deposit." She hesitated, scanned the document, receipt, contract, wire details. Her eyes flicked to the signature, R. Cruz. "Ah, right. Of course. Please come in. I'll make a note." She didn't look me in the eye after that. I didn't take it personally. Once inside, I walked past a long table, dressed in white linens and adorned with silver-framed thank you cards. "Special thanks to our sponsors," one banner read. At the top, in bold font, The Carmody Keene Foundation. I blinked. There was no foundation. It was something Delilah had invented to look official. A shell name, backdated with a logo she probably made in Canva. I scanned the names below. Businesses, a boutique gym she used to work with. Not one mention of R. Cruz Consulting. Not even small print. Not a single syllable. I stepped to the side, opened my phone, and pulled up the confirmation email from the venue. The receipt, the account transfer, the initials. It was all there. I'd kept it organized, not because I needed credit, but because credit was how you tracked what you had lost. She didn't just erase me, she replaced me, with a fiction that looked better on paper. Back at the condo, 2 weeks before the event, I had received a letter. Real envelope, stamped, handwritten. It came from a shelter I had donated to privately the month prior, after they reached out during a funding emergency. Delilah had been the one to grab the mail that morning. I hadn't thought twice about it. That evening, I saw the envelope, opened, wrinkled, tossed in the trash under a pizza box. I pulled it out. The letter inside was short but sincere. Your generosity helped keep 27 women safe this month. Thank you for believing in second chances. No signature, no public shout-out. Just paper. Honest paper. She never said a word about it. I never asked. The morning after the party, I came home early. I didn't expect to see her up yet, but there she was, sprawled across the sectional, in leggings and a hoodie, phone in hand, scrolling. The smell of lavender body spray still clung to the hallway. "Morning," she said, eyes never leaving her screen. I walked past her, straight into my office, shut the door, sat down. There was no need for confrontation. I had no interest in another performance. I logged into my accounting software and created a new folder, Household. Inside it, I opened a blank invoice. Line item, guest rent, utilities, grocery reimbursement. Client, Delilah Carmody. Payment terms, due the 5th of each month. Delivery, Zelle or check. I hit Save as Recurring, leaned back, and stared at the screen. If she wanted to treat this like a partnership, we'd do it the right way. From here on out, every cost would come with a receipt. I heard her laugh from the living room, loud and fake, likely some reality show echoing off the walls. But I didn't feel like correcting anything anymore. It wasn't that I wanted distance, it was that I no longer wanted distortion. And people like Delilah thrived on distortion. They needed a flexible version of truth they could sculpt to fit their stories. Mine had bones. Mine held weight. That morning, as she left to run errands in my car, I watched from the window. Then I opened my email and began drafting a lease agreement with her name on it. We were going to do this by the book. After sending that lease draft, I closed my laptop, got dressed for work, and took the long way to the office. I didn't want to arrive before Everett. I wanted to walk in right after him, not out of strategy, but because I was tired of being early for people who never noticed. We hadn't spoken since the party. His texts were brief, mostly logistics, no emojis, no, "Hey, how are you?" I didn't expect much, but I could feel the shift. Something about the way he had looked at me that night, glass in hand, jaw clenched. He wasn't just embarrassed. He was questioning everything. By mid-morning, we had our usual Monday strategy touch point. He walked in holding 2 coffees, set one on my desk without a word, and sat across from me. I opened the quarterly projections. We got through the first few agenda items like nothing was different. He was focused, but less performative than usual, like he wasn't trying to impress anymore. Then he saw it. He flipped to the next slide and froze, eyes locked on the signature line at the bottom of a pitch deck I'd finalized over the weekend. R. Cruz, founder, R. Curve Strategies. He blinked. Wait, that's you? That's... I looked up slowly. Yes? He leaned back. I didn't realize that's what the R stood for. No one ever asks. He let out a quiet exhale, almost a laugh, the kind you use when something suddenly clicks and you're not sure if you feel enlightened or stupid. So, I've been working for the family failure. You've been working with her, I corrected. There's a difference. He didn't smile, but he nodded. A few minutes passed before either of us spoke again. Then he cleared his throat and said, "That time you helped me recover that DEI account, remember how I was about to pull the whole proposal?" I nodded once. "Well, your feedback saved it. That account pays half my team's salaries now. I've told that story to 5 other execs, but I told it like it was my idea." I didn't respond. He looked down, almost embarrassed. "Why didn't you ever tell anyone about who you are, what you do?" "Because nobody ever listened when I wasn't holding a microphone." He nodded again, slower this time. I saw it land. The next afternoon, Everett sat in on the final video review with the production company that had handled the party. I wasn't there, but Tilda, the lead editor, messaged me later with something odd. "Hey," she wrote, "this might be nothing, but Everett got weird when he saw a spot was missing in the slideshow. Thought you should know." When I followed up, she called me directly. "Okay, so, you remember that baby photo? The one of Delilah in the kitchen, with you in the background, both covered in flour?" I did. I hated that photo, but Mom had loved it. It used to sit on her piano. Well, it was in the first draft of the slideshow. Everett saw it, liked it. But a day before final delivery, Delilah said it didn't match the aesthetic and told us to remove it. She didn't say it was you in the photo, just that it cluttered the visual flow. Of course she did. That night, back home, I sat on the balcony with my laptop on my knees. The city buzzed beneath me like a distant engine, white noise for a brain that wouldn't turn off. I pulled up my text thread with Delilah. Then I typed, "Don't speak for me again, especially not on a stage you didn't pay for." She replied 20 minutes later with a laughing gif, the kind that winks like it's in on some secret you'll never be part of. I didn't respond. Instead, I stared at the message and thought about how long I'd let her run the show. Let her craft the narrative. Let her cut pieces out of my life, photos, names, facts, because they didn't match the version she wanted to present. Some people confuse quiet with weakness. They think it means you're retreating, but retreat isn't surrender. Sometimes it's preparation. And I was done being the ghost in her success story. By Monday afternoon, the weight in my chest had settled into something sharper. Not grief, not anger, just clarity. I'd moved past waiting, past hoping. Now I was observing, collecting, filing it all like evidence in a case I didn't need to argue. Not anymore. That Sunday, while sipping coffee at my desk, I was reviewing engagement metrics for a marketing client when something odd caught my eye. A sponsored post from a new account had gone semi-viral overnight. The profile photo was generic, just a cropped image of pink tulips. But the caption? "Delilah Carmody is the kind of woman other women aspire to be. Grace under pressure, vision beyond the ordinary." Watching her lead was the highlight of my year. My jaw tightened. It was written like a press release. The hashtags were even more precise. Leadership goals, unstoppable bride, cheer power moves. I switched tabs, ran a quick IP trace through our analytics software. It wasn't advanced surveillance. It was just a tool we used to flag bot accounts and track influencer campaigns. The post had been written from our apartment, from my Wi-Fi. She wrote her own tribute. To herself. I leaned back in my chair. No surprise. Just confirmation. I should have felt disgusted, but mostly what I felt was sad. For both of us. That she needed to be admired so badly, she was willing to manufacture it, and that I had once tried to earn that admiration for real. I didn't bring it up. I let it sit. That night, around 11:15, I was brushing my teeth when my phone buzzed on the counter. A long text preview appeared. It was from Delilah. Not to me. At least, not intentionally. "Once this wedding's over, she's gone. I'm done pretending she's useful. Tired of babying her ego. It's time she learns how to fend for herself." No emoji. No punctuation. Just cold. I stared at it for a moment. Then I wiped my hands, Opened the message and hit forward. Recipient: Everett Keene. No comment, no explanation, just the raw text, delivered as is. Then I turned off my phone and went to bed. The next morning, the sun came in early and strong. I padded into the kitchen, brewed a pot of coffee, and waited. Delilah eventually appeared in her usual athleisure: messy bun, yoga pants, smug aura. "Did you finish the almond milk?" she asked, opening the fridge. "I did," she shrugged. "You could have picked some up." I poured my coffee, sat at the counter, and finally looked at her. "The thing about pretending someone's useless," I said quietly, "is you'd better hope they never stop being useful to you." She blinked, caught off guard, then laughed like she always did when she didn't have a real answer. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said, still calm. "I'm being done." I left the room. She didn't follow. Later that day, Everett knocked gently on the frame of my office door. No meeting scheduled, no pretext. Just him, looking like a man who had finally stopped doubting his instincts. He walked in, sat down, and folded his hands in his lap. "She never told me you were sisters," he said quietly. I didn't reply. "She told people she built this life, that she created something from nothing, that you were a distant relative, not who you are." I exhaled slowly. "She created the story. I just paid the invoice." He nodded. "You've been helping her this whole time, haven't you?" "She's been standing on ground," I poured, "but she never once looked down." There was silence, but it wasn't awkward. It was acknowledgement. A moment where the room adjusted its shape, not to make me bigger, but to make the truth visible. He looked at me, eyes clear now. "You should be the one speaking next weekend, not her." I tilted my head slightly. "What makes you think I want the mic?" "Because you're the one who earned it." I didn't answer him right away. I just leaned back in my chair and looked at him, really looked at him. Not as my sister's fiancé, not as my employee, but as a man who had finally learned how to sit with the truth. By the end of the week, I got the email confirming my place on the agenda. The subject line was bland. Speaker confirmation, culture and integrity panel, but the name next to mine wasn't. It was hers, Delilah Carmody. Still listed as co-host. Saturday came too fast. I'd ironed my blouse twice, not because it needed it, but because I didn't want to look like I'd tried too hard. I arrived 15 minutes early, walked past the valet, past the branded welcome wall, and into the sleek, glass-walled lobby of Everett's firm like I'd been there all my life. Because I had. Just never from the front entrance. The room was buzzing with executives and clients. I took my seat at a round table near the front, half listening to opening remarks, until Everett stood up. He straightened his blazer, tapped the mic gently, and began. "Leadership," he said, "isn't just about showing up when the cameras are rolling. It's about the people who hold things together before anyone's watching." He thanked the board, the team, even the interns. Then his voice dropped just slightly. "And most of all," he continued, "to the woman who shaped how I lead, how I listen, and how I choose to grow, Caitlin Cruz." The room paused. Actual honest silence. She's the one who made this platform possible. She's the one who reminded me that real builders rarely take the stage. But they should. People clapped. Not out of obligation, not politely. It felt earned. Across the room, Delilah was frozen in place. She clapped too, 2 beats late. Her mouth smiled, but her eyes didn't. After the panel, during the cocktail hour, people started approaching me. Strangers, senior partners. A woman in a navy wrap dress from New York came up first. "So, tell me," she said, swirling her drink, "why weren't you listed as co-host for the engagement event? I heard you funded most of it." I blinked. "I did," I said simply. She laughed gently, not unkind. "Well, that's a narrative adjustment waiting to happen." Another voice chimed in. A man from Boston I'd met once at a tech summit. Didn't you also design that Q3 rollout Everett keeps bragging about? Before I could answer, someone else leaned in. She's always been quiet, but you know what they say. It's the quiet ones who run the room. Delilah was nearby, trying to insert herself into other conversations, her laugh louder than necessary, eyes darting like she was trying to track too many things at once. She's very private, she finally offered when someone asked about me. Not into attention. But by then, the room had shifted. Eyes turned when I spoke. People nodded when I made a point. The story she had crafted for years was crumbling under its own weight. Later that evening, just outside the coat check, she caught me in the hallway. "We need to talk," she said, brushing past a couple waiting for their Uber. I didn't flinch. "No, Delilah, we don't." She grabbed my arm lightly. "You blindsided me." "This isn't my fight anymore," I replied. "The truth is, doing just fine without me." Her jaw clenched. "I'm going to clarify everything, set the record straight." "Then start," I said, meeting her gaze. "Start by telling them who paid the florist." She blinked. Just once, then let go. The next morning, I walked into the office early. The cleaning crew was still finishing up, vacuum humming low in the hallway. I stopped outside the boardroom. There, freshly mounted, was a new brass nameplate, Catlin Cruz Executive Advisor to Global Strategy. It wasn't loud, it wasn't spotlighted, but it was solid, permanent. I stepped inside, flipped through the minutes from last quarter, and marked a few corrections. They were finally saying my name. But I had stopped waiting to hear it. By that Friday night, the story had traveled without me. I didn't need to correct anything, didn't need to press send. It was already unraveling, thread by careful thread. I found out about the engagement ending, not from Delilah, but from Everett, through a brief, formal, company-wide notice that stated he would no longer be moving forward with personal obligations previously announced. Polished. Vague. But if you knew, you knew. The part he didn't say publicly came in a text that simply read, "You were right. I should have seen it sooner." I didn't reply. Later that evening, while reviewing a vendor contract at home, I heard the unmistakable thud of her keys hitting the entryway table. She hadn't texted to say she was coming back, just walked in like nothing had shifted, like she still had a right to the quiet air between our walls. "You won," she said flatly, setting her bag on the chair. "I wasn't playing," I answered, eyes still on the document. "You cost me everything." "No," I said, meeting her gaze now. "You gave it up the moment you thought the illusion was more valuable than the truth." She left again, slamming the door, not for dramatic effect, but because even she knew there was no clever line left to deliver. The following Monday, IT flagged an internal concern during a routine compliance audit. An email had been sent from my credentials to one of our largest clients nearly 6 months prior, declining a renewal. A $200,000 account lost. I reviewed the logs in silence. The timestamp, the device ID, the location metadata. It wasn't just a mistake. It was done from our apartment, from her laptop. When I was in New York at a speaking engagement, I said nothing, no HR report, no confrontation. I scheduled a call with the client, apologized for the miscommunication, sent a revised proposal within 24 hours. I CC'd Everett, finance, legal, all professional, all traceable. Then, I walked into the boardroom that Thursday morning, mid-quarter review already underway, and opened the backup documentation. "This," I said calmly, "is how we lost Dervon and Briggs. It won't happen again." No one argued. They just nodded. That evening, I returned home early. The building was quiet, early dusk settling over the skyline. I walked down the hallway, badge still warm in my hand from the office scan. As I approached our unit, I saw the keycard reader blink red. She was standing there, confused, jiggling the card like it might just be a tech glitch. I stepped around her, unlocked the door with my code, held it open. "You locked me out," she said, voice cracking for the first time in a long while. No, I said simply. I ended the lease. You didn't sign the new one. She stared at me, arms crossed tight against her chest. I paid for your silence longer than I should have, I added. Now it's time to earn your own voice. Behind the door sat a single duffel bag, packed neatly. Nothing spiteful, just final. She stepped inside, grabbed the handle, and turned back. I was trying to protect us. No, I said softly. You were trying to preserve the version of you that didn't need me. But you always did. I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. 2 days later, I was back in my office early, finishing prep for our expansion review with the European Partner Group. I had already archived the last financial document tied to her name, closed the tab, unlinked the account. The past wasn't gone. It was just no longer open. When my team arrived, I stood and greeted them with the kind of ease that comes from clarity, not control. We're pivoting, I told them. New structure, same standards. Let's move forward. The room nodded. I glanced at my screen one last time before the call began. Some exits don't need doors slamming, just a quiet click, a decision, and no need to revisit it again. 3 years passed, not all at once, not in leaps or milestones, just slowly, steadily, like rain that erodes stone without ever announcing its presence. It passed in breaths, meetings, emails, and the way silence settles into your life after you stop trying to explain yourself to people who never really listened. I didn't plan to arrive where I am. Not exactly. But I'd built it, piece by piece, after everything burned down. Not in anger, just in necessity. When you're done fighting for recognition that won't come, you start building your own platform. Something that doesn't need applause to stand. Something that holds others up, too. That morning, I had just finished speaking at the Industry Leadership Forum in Boston. A room full of power suits and polished shoes. The kind of place that used to terrify me. Now, it didn't. Now, I owned my space in it. The applause I received wasn't thunderous, but it was real. Not performative. Not obligatory. I'd learned to tell the difference, and to value the kind that didn't need to shout to mean something. Backstage, someone pressed a bottle of water into my hand, murmured something about a media photo. I nodded, already half turned to leave, when I caught a glimpse, just a flicker, of movement near the far wall. She stood there. Delilah. No entourage, no crowd. Just her. She wore a visitor badge around her neck, the kind they give to Pulse Ones and quiet observers. She didn't smile, didn't call out, just watched me like she wasn't sure if she had the right to, and for a heartbeat, I thought she might turn away. But she didn't. She didn't say anything at the event, didn't make a scene. She simply disappeared as the crowd filtered out. I didn't ask around, I didn't look for her. But that afternoon, I found her, seated alone at the Terrace Cafe behind the hotel. Not the main one, the showy lobby cafe full of glass and marble. No. She was at the little garden cafe, the one you had to know existed to find, the one surrounded by hedges and half-forgotten orchids. She'd remembered it, or maybe she'd just hoped I would. When I walked up, she looked up briefly. 10 minutes, she said. That's all I'm asking. I sat without speaking. She didn't waste time, didn't soften her voice or decorate her words. I wasn't well, she said. Back then. I told myself I was protecting our family name, holding the line. But really, I think I was just afraid. Afraid of what people would think if they knew how much I leaned on you. How much of me only stood because you were holding the weight. She paused. No tears, no theatrics, just truth spoken like a stone finally laid down after being carried too long. I can't fix it, she added. I know that. But I'm sorry. For what I said, for how I made you feel, for all of it. I let the moment stretch. I wasn't angry, not anymore. I'd let that go a long time ago. I was simply still. Solid in a way I hadn't been when I used to chase her approval like a dog chasing headlights. Apologies don't always fix things, I said, but I respect that you showed up, and that you didn't come here asking for anything back. She nodded. Not in defeat. In understanding. There's a difference. When we stood to leave, she lingered, took half a step forward, shoulders tensing as if for a hug. I didn't move. I don't hate you, I said gently, but I can't build from where we broke. She stepped back, arms falling, quietly, to her sides. That's fair, she said. We didn't say goodbye. We just left. Two women who once knew how to tear each other down with silence, now choosing a different kind of quiet. The kind that didn't need winners or apologies etched in stone. That night, back in my hotel suite, I stood at the window. The Boston skyline stretched out like a circuit board made of light. One of the buildings across the river had the glowing logo of my consulting firm. My name, my work, lit in soft lines against steel and glass. No champagne, no spotlight, but it was enough. A soft ping from my laptop broke the silence. Subject: Thank you from Kara Ellis, founder, Rise Up Analytics. She'd been in the audience. I remembered her face, bright, focused, taking notes like the future depended on them. Maybe it did. Just wanted to say thank you, her email read, for making room for people like me, for showing there's more than one way to be powerful. I stared at the words for a long moment before typing. We don't wait for room, Kara, I wrote. We build it. Then I hit send. Outside, the city thrummed. People moving through subway tunnels, hotel lobbies, airport gates, rushing through doors, carrying versions of themselves they'd stitched together from heartbreak and ambition. I thought about how many times I'd been called the family failure. How many rooms I'd entered knowing someone was waiting to see me fall, but I didn't fall, because some of us aren't meant to be the crown. We're meant to be the foundation, and foundations don't demand attention. They don't beg to be loved. They carry everything else, quietly, relentlessly, and with more strength than anyone sees. Justice wasn't about vengeance. It wasn't about payback. It was this moment, being able to walk away, whole, without needing to be seen, without needing to look back.